It's Lights Camera Jackson. Welcome to LCJ Live. Today is Sunday, April 7, 2024. First show of the second quarter of 2024. But we've got the same movie at the top of the box office that we had to end the first quarter, and that's Godzilla x Kong. Is the X silent? Is it not? Doesn't matter because it's making money. It made another $31.7 million this weekend, up to $135 million total for Godzilla Kong, the new empire for Warner Brothers. Warner Brothers is having a good run. When you look at the end of last year with Wonka, when you look at the beginning of this year, the early part of the year, that continued on, and then we got Dune Part 2, and now this. And now the big question will be for Warner Brothers, how big will Furiosa be in May? That's going to open over Memorial Day weekend, going up against the Garfield movie, and that'll be a very interesting battle at the box office for sure. Things are looking good here for LCJ Live today, but maybe not so much for Monkey Man. In second place this weekend with $10.2 million. Not a lot for Dev Patel and Universal. Jordan Peele as the producer on this. You know, they took it from Netflix, they took it to theaters, and they were hoping, I think, for bigger things. I know my colleague of mine, Mike Sargent, saw it. We're going to talk about it on a new Too Fast, Two Films podcast episode we're going to record today. There's another new episode you can listen to when you're done watching LCJ Live today at TooFastTwoFilms.com, where we review Godzilla x Kong, as well as the documentary Remembering Gene Wilder. In third this weekend is not The First Omen. No, that opened in fourth. Third place goes to Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, which added $9 million this weekend. It's at 88.9. At this point, Sony is going to see that this gets over $100 million domestically. But it will not get to the $130 million that they were hoping for. Remember that 2016 Ghostbusters did $128. 2021 Afterlife, $129. This is not going to get to $130. If it gets to $130, it'll be shocking at this point because we're already down to $9 million at 88.9. It will get to 100, but I don't think it's going to make much more than that. I've got some pals here with me celebrating today the series finale of Curb Your Enthusiasm, Larry David's long-running HBO show, and I've got the Seinfeld pals here with me. Of course, Larry co-created Seinfeld, Jerry Seinfeld. We've got George and Jerry and Kramer and Elaine here to celebrate the finale of Curb Your Enthusiasm. As you know, I love television series finales. I love them. This is the case, though, where I've watched a good portion of Curb Your Enthusiasm heading into the series finale. Not necessarily this season. I've only seen the first 4 episodes of this season, so I'm a little behind. But I've seen a lot of Curb over the years, and coming up, I'll tell you how I met Susie Essman 15 and a half years ago. But in fourth place this weekend is The First Omen with $8.4 million. Not a strong open, but stronger than what Immaculate opened to a few weeks ago from Neon. A lot of people saying, oh, this is coming right after Immaculate, but this is actually a bigger open than Immaculate. So, you know, sort of a win, but not really a win. I think Disney and 20th Century were hoping for more, especially with a lot of horror movies out right now, but maybe there are starting to be too many horror movies. Not everybody can go to every single one every single weekend, but we'll talk more about Immaculate and another horror movie that I got to see the other day that just got outside the top 10 this weekend. We'll talk about that here coming up in just a moment on LCJ Live. In fifth this weekend, Kung Fu Panda 4 added $7.9 million. A lot of kids out of school this past week. A lot of kids have school off tomorrow because of the total solar eclipse. By the way, this is why I wore this shirt, because it's got some of the dots and figure it covers the sun and the brightness. $7.9 million for Kung Fu Panda 4. It's at 166.1. It's making money, and it will now have a shot at trying to pass Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, which made 185.5. I'm not sure it's going to get there, but it will come close to that 185.5 from Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. One of the biggest success stories for DreamWorks Animation in a long time. Remember, Trolls Band Together, which opened last November, only totaled a little over 100 million. I think 104, 105. We're at 166.1. For Kung Fu Panda 4, that's a huge success story for DreamWorks and Universal this year. Dune Part 2, dropping down this weekend. Where are we at? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're at 6th place for Dune Part 2 this weekend. It's starting to slow down a little bit. 7.2 million. It's at 264.9. You know, I don't know if it's going to reach Oppenheimer. I don't, at this point, it's slowing down so much that I don't see that happening. You look back at Oppenheimer, it was matching Oppenheimer very closely with the box office results, but Oppenheimer totaled 330. Right now we're at 265. No, I'm going to say now no. Dune Part 2, unless it only, unless it only has a small drop and it makes another 6 million next weekend. There's not a huge movies. Yes, Civil War. We'll talk about Civil War in a minute, but maybe it reaches 300, but I don't see 330. But nonetheless, Warner Brothers is thrilled with Dune Part 2. They gotta announce Dune Messiah pretty soon. Next up, film called Someone Like You, romance movie. Fathom Events made $3 million this weekend. Not bad. And then you got three movies that nearly tie. Arthur the King with $1.5 million. It's at 22.2 for Lionsgate. Wicked Little Letters with a nationwide expansion this weekend. Jessie Buckley, Olivia Colman. They were in The Lost Daughter. Now they're in this. I saw it several weeks ago. It's better when it's dramatic than when it tries to be comedic. $1.5 million for Wicked Little Letters. It's at 1.6 million total for Sony Classics. And rounding out your top 10 this weekend is Immaculate, the Sydney Sweeney horror movie from Neon with 1.4 million. It's at 14.2. It is the fourth biggest movie ever for Neon, behind Parasite, I, Tonya, and Ferrari, which just opened a few months ago. So the fourth biggest movie needs another 4.5 million-ish to beat Ferrari to be number 3. Yeah, I don't see that happening at this point. But speaking of high-grossing movies for a certain studio, Late Night with the Devil, which exited the top 10 this weekend after 2 weeks, but still solid third weekend of 1.1 million. It is up to $8.5 million for IFC. It is one of the highest-grossing IFC movies of all time. Now, when you look at the list, yeah, My Big Fat Greek Wedding is number 1. What a monster that was 20-something years ago. You've also got Boyhood, the Oscar winner for Patricia Arquette, which made about $25 million a decade ago. You got one or two other movies, and then here comes Late Night with the Devil, already one of the highest grossing movies ever for IFC Films. It had the biggest open ever for the studio, and it will try to get to $10 million. It'd be nice if it made another $800,000 next weekend. Some buzz on it. They can try to get this to $10 million, which would be quite an accomplishment for a good movie. I saw this on Thursday. I finally caught up with it, and I like it for the most part. I even like it a little more after I thought about it for a bit. I just appreciate what went into Late Night with the Devil. The creativity, the casting, the execution of it. It was very interesting. It was fun enough. It was entertaining enough. The late night talk show vibe of the 70s and what went into the story and the performances. Does everything work? No. I think it absolutely makes a few missteps with some of the characters. I don't think the sidekick character quite as dynamic as he should have been. And there were a few moments that didn't quite gel, but not a lot. Honestly, had a good experience with it. Yeah, it does feel a little long, but you have to consider when you watch a Johnny Carson, like I do, a lot of times weeknights, 10 o'clock Eastern on Antenna TV, some segments are better than others. Sometimes the show feels fun and fast, and some nights it's not quite as good. And you feel that a little bit with Late Night with the Devil. It starts to drag a little bit towards the end, and it does get out of control horror-wise, but it works for the most part. And if you're into late night TV, you're into horror movies, go see Late Night with the Devil. It is good. Is it outstanding? No, but you know what? I give them a lot of credit for everything they put into it. It is a good film. Go see Late Night with the Devil. All right, let's talk about some of the movies that are coming out this week, some of the interviews that I've got, some other movies that I've seen, and places I've been. I was in Philadelphia the other night for the 76ers Thunder game. That was a lot of fun. M. Night Shyamalan was just over there. He was not that far away. It was cool to see M. Night Shyamalan there. Thank you to the Sixers. I got to go on the court. Thank you to all who entered that Twitter X poll question of, did I make the shot? I did not make the shot, but that's okay. You get one shot on the court, but it was a lot of fun. This week's big movies in the theaters, Civil War. Alex Garland, A24. I think Ex Machina is an excellent film. I caught up with it like 4 or 5 weeks after it came out in 2015. Very good film. Annihilation, I love. I still think Annihilation is his best film. And Natalie Portman is excellent in it. The deep ways the story goes, the performances, the visuals, the way you are hooked and your interest is still there. I think it was in my top 10 for 2018. It's an outstanding film. Annihilation. I remember I got to see Annihilation a couple nights early, and it was me and 3 other people in the room. It was just, we were just glued to the screen that entire time. I will never forget that. It's rare. Sometimes you go to movies and sometimes you're the only one there. Sometimes it's a ton of people. For Annihilation, it was me and 3 other people, and we just were blown away by it. So there's a lot on the line here for Civil War. I Hated Men, Alex Garland's last film from 2 years ago, with Jessie Buckley, who, can I just say this about Jessie Buckley? She was outstanding in Wild Rose. If you have never seen Wild Rose, find it. Neon 2019. What a movie. The best movie of 2019. I got a poster of it right over there. And she is just, it's a hell of a breakthrough performance. And quite a movie. Julie Walters, really good in it as well, the music. So I've been a Jessie Buckley fan since Wild Rose, even though I haven't liked every movie that she's been in since. I didn't like Men. Wicked Little Letter, she's got some good moments in. She was in Judy as well with Renee Zellweger, and some other films over the last few years. But my God, is Wild Rose an outstanding film. But I Hated Men, which was 2 years ago from Alex Garland. And now he's back with A24. This is a highly anticipated film for a lot of people who love Ex Machina and Annihilation. And Alex Garland also behind the 28 Days, Weeks Later movies as the writer. And now here comes Civil War, a movie with Kirsten Dunst and Jesse Plemons and Nick Offerman. And it's a big action, drama, intensity. Does it work? I'm going to be seeing it this week. Does it work? I hope it's good. I hope it's interesting. I hope it raises a lot of questions and makes you think. That's what a lot of great movies should do. Obviously, it's a departure from the science fiction with the robots and orbs and things like that, and locations and what Alex Garland did in previous films, and then Men. I don't know what the hell he was doing with Men, but this will be very interesting. I think it'll have a solid opening weekend. You know, maybe 20 million. It'll try to beat Godzilla Kong. I think A24 hopes that it's their biggest open ever. It needs, I think, 14 million, something like that, to be the biggest open ever, to pass Hereditary, the Toni Collette horror movie from 2018. I think A24 wants that. They're cautiously optimistic that it will have a good opening weekend. But are there going to be some people who go, I just don't want to see this movie right now? That this is not, it's got to be really good for people to say, you know what, I'm going to take a chance on it and go. So A24 has their fingers crossed that this is going to have a strong opening weekend and that audiences are going to respond to it. So we'll see what happens with Civil War. The complete other end of the spectrum is Woody Woodpecker Goes to Camp, which comes out on Netflix on Friday. My conversation with John Rosenbaum is available now at animationscoop.com as well as lcj.podbean.com. Fun, zany, wacky Woody Woodpecker new live-action animated comedy on Netflix. If you've got questions or comments, you're watching live on YouTube, thank you. Send them in here for LCJ Live. Another new movie. One of my favorite actors, Dennis Quaid, has yet another sports movie out this week. It's called The Long Game. I'm going to hopefully check it out this week. So Dennis Quaid in yet another sports movie. Let me say this. If you are not looking forward to or don't have a curiosity factor towards Dennis Quaid Ronald Reagan movie that's coming out at the end of August, you're crazy. You have to be at least curious. Whatever end of the political spectrum you are on, every time an actor plays a president, there's always a curiosity factor. And here comes Dennis Quaid in this long in the works Ronald Reagan movie that's finally going to be released in theaters on August 30. He filmed it a few years ago. They've been trying to get it out there. He's collaborated with this director a few times. Remember that movie On a Wing and a Prayer from last year? It's that same director, Sean McNamara. And it's a Ronald Reagan movie. I am so looking forward to it. Curious about it. Seeing if Dennis Quaid really immerses himself as Ronald Reagan. Obviously, U.S. president, iconic actor, iconic figure in American history. That is coming out August 30th. This week, Dennis Quaid in The Long Game. Another movie coming out this week is called Sasquatch Sunset. This has been getting a lot of attention. I'm going to try to see this soon. And we'll see if it's weird. If it's weird in a good way. You know how you take those surveys sometimes and they go, what did you think of this? Is it silly in a good way or silly in a bad way? And that's what we'll see what happens with Sasquatch Sunset from Bleecker Street. And then on Hulu Friday is a movie called The Greatest Hits, which I have seen. And It is in select theaters now. It goes to Hulu Friday. Lucy Boynton, I got a poster of Sing Street over there. Lucy Boynton was so good in Sing Street, she should have been up for supporting actress. And then she was in Bohemian Rhapsody. Now in The Greatest Hits. She loves movies about music, clearly. And this is a movie that has a good hook, a good premise, but gosh, does it fall apart quickly and through the whole way, which is really too bad. I'm going to explain more on Too Fast, Too Films with the new episode this week, but yeah, it's unfortunate that it just doesn't work. Gets messier and messier, and you go, why? Why does it have to go in these directions? Why does it have to be this way? Does this make sense? Not completely. Ethan Skelly says he saw Sasquatch Sunset and loved it. I know it's played at some festivals and some things. All right, so hopefully it's good. Hopefully it is. Unfortunately, The Greatest Hits is not. I watched over the last 2 nights the Steve Martin documentary on Apple TV Plus, and I really like part 1. And part 2 is, If you want the early years of Steve Martin and it's just archival footage and audio, watch part 1. Part 2 is him today, but it also goes back to the movies he made, and it's scattered and loose and all over the place, and there's some solid moments in it, but as far as the filmmaking and the attention and the care put in, part 1 is a lot better than part 2. Morgan Neville won the Oscar for 20 Feet from Stardom, did Won't You Be My Neighbor, did the Anthony Bourdain movie that I thought was very good. Part 1 of this, right up there with the Anthony Bourdain film, The Impact of Won't You Be My Neighbor, The Impact of 20 Feet from Stardom. Part 2, not so much. But I credit him for going deep into the early years of Steve Martin and why he had such an impact on comedy and society, and learned a lot, and a lot of good stuff in part 1. So check that out on Apple TV+. Interviews for this week. Rich Magallanes, the EP and showrunner of the new Dora animated series, premiering Friday on Paramount+. That Animation Scoop Q&A, an LCJ Q&A podcast episode, will be available tomorrow, starting in the morning. There's an embargo till 9 a.m. Eastern. Then you'll get that at those outlets. Later this week, Animation Scoop Q&A with the makers of an animated film, quite a movie, Chicken for Linda. Look for that at animationscoop.com. Won the big Annecy Awards last year. And then later this week as well, new LCJ Q&A podcast episode, animationscoop.com Q&A with the director and animation director of Puffin Rock and the New Friends, which is available on digital platforms Tuesday, April 16. It's the latest feature from Cartoon Saloon. You know them, you love them. Secret of Kells, My Father's Dragon, Wolf Walkers, The Breadwinner. Now this Puffin Rock series gets a continuation feature film. It's a sweet movie, so I talked with them about that, as well as celebrating 25 years of Cartoon Saloon. So that's a good conversation. Look for that later this week. All right. Tonight's the finale of Curb Your Enthusiasm. Before we go, let me tell you a quick story of how I met Susie Essman 15 and a half years ago. It was November 2008. It was a big time for Susie Essman. Why? Because she voiced Mittens the cat in Disney Animation's Bolt. I had seen Bolt. There was a nationwide paid preview screening a week before it opened, or a couple weeks before it opened in November, so I saw it once. What was it, Thanksgiving time? Yeah, it was like Thanksgiving weekend, so it'd been out for a little bit. And I went to see it a second time with other members of my family. And we were going in to the multiplex. And all of a sudden, I see this group of people standing around in the middle of the hallway of the theater. And in the center of it looked like Susie Essman. And I'm going, wow, Susie Essman is here. What is she doing here? So I go to that group of people. I make my way in. I say, are you Susie Essman? She says, yes. And I say, saw Bolt, seen it again. What are you doing here? And she said, I live nearby. I just took my family to see Bolt, and I live nearby with my husband, and we just went to see Bolt. So I said, awesome. Saw you on $1 Million Password with Regis and all that. So then a couple weeks later, not that long later, we do this interview at the TV station I worked at, Capital News 9, and it aired a little while after that. And we talked about Curb, we talked about Bolt, and we talked about some other things, and she couldn't have been nicer. And I saw her at a book signing a year and a half or so later, and she was wonderful. She signed a picture for me that I have somewhere, and she was great, terrific. And it'll be interesting to see how the finale of Curb Your Enthusiasm is tonight. By the way, Susie had a great cameo in theater camp this summer in the final scene. One of my favorite moments of theater camp by far was seeing the Susie Essman cameo. Was this at Crossgates? No, it was at Colony Center, but good guess, Ethan. But it was at Colony Center. And that movie theater had just opened 5 months prior, about 5, 6 months prior in May. And yeah, it was at Colony Center. So yeah, it was fun seeing Susie. And she signed a book as well for my grandfather when her book came out a while later. And I think she signed one for me. And an iconic character in Susie Green, and of course Mittens the Cat in Bolt. But wow, Susie Green and Larry David changed television with Curb Your Enthusiasm, made HBO, you know, it allowed HBO to be the phenomenon that it is, along with The Sopranos and Sex and the City and a few others at that time. But wow, when it comes to comedy, Curb Your Enthusiasm, Larry Sanders Show, back in the earlier days of HBO, wow. And now here we go with the finale of Curb tonight. So, there you go. That's my Susie Essman story. Hope you enjoyed the finale. Hope it's good. There's more series finales coming soon. Young Sheldon ends in May, and there's some other series finales on the way. And I think NBC just canceled Quantum Leap, so that's too bad for that show after 2 years. All right. Thanks for watching today's episode of LCJ Live. Appreciate it. When we're back here next Sunday, we'll see how Civil War does. I think it'll be #1. I think it'll hit 20 million. But it could have a strong Thursday, Friday, and then fall quickly. So we'll see what happens. Godzilla Kong will battle Civil War for #1. And we'll talk about the big movies opening for the 19th, including Guy Ritchie's latest, The Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare, and more. As always, go to Twitter X at LCJ Reviews, Instagram at LightsCamJackson. The website is lights-camera-jackson.com. Subscribe and like the YouTube channel, youtube.com/lightscamerajackson. Hope you've been enjoying WrestleMania. And we will see you next time for LCJ Live. Bye-bye, everybody. Thank you so much for watching.